Yes, thank you, everybody. Welcome. This is a webinar on equity in K-12 computer science. I want to thank our panelists. We're going to introduce them in just a second. Just a few housekeeping items as we get started here. First of all, a quick shout out and thank you to Rex Academy for hosting this very important conversation. Yeah, thank you. I also got some feedback from my audience members. Hey, there we go. Am I a little bit brighter now? You guys can see me. I got this nice, beautiful light behind me. There we go. I'll turn up my brightness just a little bit. Not too bright, though. Rex Academy for hosting this. This is a very important conversation that we're going to have today, and we thank all of you that have joined us today as well. We have already 27 attendees in the queue. You guys are welcome to, of course, use the Q&A feature or send direct messages to the panelists. We'll try to hit those as we go through. We do have quite a few questions to get through today, but if you have questions, I want to make sure you guys have time at the end to interact as well. A couple quick things about Rex Academy. If you guys get a chance to check this out, I'll actually show this at the end of the presentation as well. But let me go ahead and switch my screen share real quick. And Rex Academy right now is actually giving away, speaking because this is all about computer science, so it actually is a very timely message. They're actually letting users use their curriculum for free. Let me just do this quick screen share over. Right now, they're doing a free pilot. So if you see here where it says start free trial and you click on that rex.academy, you will see that there is a free trial and you can actually have a free trial to try any of the courses, one of the courses in their curriculum lineup, which is pretty extensive. Lots of great stuff there to try out. This would be a great time to try it out for those of you that are looking at curriculum changes or just different ideas when it comes to computer science curriculum. Very self-paced, mobile-friendly, everything, all web-based, so not a lot of installs. So we'll talk about this again at the end, but I just want to give them a quick shout out for making this possible, and I think that's important as we get into this conversation. As Adam mentions in the chat, yes, free 99, his favorite price. That's correct. So without further ado, let's go ahead and introduce our esteemed panelists. Rochelle Dene Poth, she is a Spanish and STEAM teacher, I believe a middle school, right, Rochelle?
It's a junior. My school is a junior senior high school, so grade 7, so part middle school, 7 through 12.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and I like the mix of STEAM and Spanish because there is, we're talking about coding as a language. There's also, of course, foreign languages. So probably a little bit of crossover there. I'll be looking forward to hear what you have to share about that as well today. So thank you for joining us. We also have Tapu Ahmed, who's a computer science teacher from Dallas, Texas. He's also the curriculum director at Rex Academy. So he's got some great connections and tie-ins here because you're going to tell us a little bit about your background. So how long were you doing computer science there, Tapu?
Hey, Carl.
Or Mr. T, as we call you.
Yeah,
yes.
Mr. T. That's the name I picked up teaching at Geyer High School in Dedham for basically the last 5 years. So though I think the principal thing I learned is that there aren't enough of us. So I was on an island by myself for a good chunk of the time. The entire district only had one computer science per high school. So the ability to collaborate and then build things together was very, very limited in that environment. Yep.
Yeah, and we'll definitely talk about why a lot of what's motivated you, I know, to join Rex, but also just kind of the conversation we're having today. A lot of what your background ties into what we're talking about today. So thank you for joining us. And then a man who needs no introduction. He just got rid of the birthday balloons in his background. This is Dr. Adam File, my co-host on the Undisrupted podcast, someone I've known for quite a long time, the Director of Technology and Media Services at Newton County School System in Georgia. How you doing, Adam?
I am doing stupendous today. So happy to be a part of this esteemed panel hosted by yourself, Carl. I mean, you'd say I don't need an introduction. I mean, everyone knows Carl Hooker, and I'm just happy that you included me in this session today.
Well, I probably should introduce myself, just to be fair. I just came on real quick. I'm Carl Hooker. For those of you that don't know, I have 22 years in education, former teacher, former administrator, now doing just a little bit of everything. You've probably seen me do trivia nights, webinar hosting, you name it, I've tried it. So I'm excited to be a part of this conversation. But one of the things that's interesting is I have connections with all three of our panelists in different ways. And I think it all ties into kind of our conversation for today. So computer science is part of it, but also equity and how does that get involved, and what role does that play in computer science, or the have and have not. So we're going to talk about that a lot today. And I'm going to kick off with our first question. We're going to go way back. We're going to hit the way back machine for all three of you. And I'll take this question off the screen in a minute. We'll go full screen on you guys in just a second. So I want you to think back to your childhood when you were in school. What was your first memory of computer science, or ed tech, I guess we could call it, in school? And Rochelle, we'll start with you, and I'll stop my screen share so we can see everybody here on the screen.
You know, all I wish I could do right now is run into the dining room where there's I have it saved there because it's from a newspaper. There's a picture of me in 7th grade, and it's in one of my books, actually. I think I braved it and put it in there, but it's a picture of me with a student, a boy in 8th grade, and our teacher, who was actually my social studies teacher for 8th grade. And we're standing around. There are two of the big, ginormous, I think they're the Apple computers, and they had just come into my school. We got 2 of them. And so that for me is probably my first memory, just thinking about like, wow, here we are with this amazing technology. They really didn't do anything, but like whatever that one did, but that was my first start with coding. And I was so excited about it that my parents, I think probably a week or 2 after that, bought a Commodore or some type of computer, this goes way back, and brought it home. And I was so excited to just start coding on my own and feeling like I was creating something. So for me, it goes way, way back for that. But if you would see that picture, you would be like, yep, that's definitely a defining moment.
I love it. And I love that some of our guests, our attendees, are actually chiming in on that. You guys can't all see it because they're sending us messages, but I'll just call out a few here. So Matt Joseph says Dr. J versus Bird. Jolie says, does an electric typewriter count? Okay. Shirley says an IBM System 360, beautiful. And then Tan says a Commodore 64, C64 basic manual. That's a good one. All right, Tapu, I'm going to add you up to the chat here too. Let's put you into the spotlight a little bit. What about you? What was your first memory?
9th grade, Mr. Johnson's computer science class. First day, I'm a little old, so it was the C programming language. Sorry, everyone. Python didn't exist at the time, neither did JavaScript. So first thing we did was print "Hello World," and I'll never forget that. That's been stapled into my brain ever since that first day. I'm like, wow, this is really cool, you know?
I love it. I love it. Yes, the Hello World. Yes, and I did C+. Now, if you feel old as a 9th grader taking it, I mean, I didn't get to that until I was in college. So, I mean, you were definitely younger than me at that point. Adam, what about you? What was your first memory of ed tech or computer science?
It would have to have been when I was in high school. We had it was a semester-long course where we had 9 weeks of keyboarding, and the other 9 weeks was computer. And I want to say it was Windows 95 was the operating system that we were utilizing, and this was around the time that Doom came out. Ooh. And all the guys and gals, we loaded Doom on the computers at school, and our computer teacher hated it because she was like, oh my gosh, you guys are playing Doom instead of doing work. And so she was so proud of herself because that weekend she was like, I came here and we took it off all the computers. None of you guys are going to be able to play it again. Literally, we're passing around the floppy, and next thing you know, all of a sudden, she got tired of trying to fight us. She was like, you know what? As long as you guys get your little computer assignments done, I don't care what you do. Just leave me alone. Because she literally had a breakdown because we knew more about it than she did, and we were just making it up as we went along.
It reminds me of some of the conversations that T and I have had about his classes, and saying like, there's some teachers that really want to restrict kids and say like, you have to go this level, then day by day. And then it was unique because he would tell me with his classes, he would just kind of let certain kids fly. If they wanted to fly, he'd let them fly and take off. So I think that's kind of cool.
Really quick side point, Adam, your story actually reminds me, right? The year before I joined, the computer science teacher apparently let his kids download Halo on computers. The district did not take too kindly to that. It's not the only, but it's one of the reasons that he was let go, because he allowed them to do that stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, I've heard of having a golden parachute, but never a golden halo. Okay, we're going to transition. So this, of course, we're going to be talking a lot about computer science. By the way, great memories. And I think it's important to start there, because I think we think about all the fun or maybe disruptive memories that we have of computer science when we were in school. And I think this is also an important segue into our next question, which is, why do we think computer science is important, and why is it something that we feel needs to be probably risen up a little bit more than it is in schools, because it's often times, and I think Rochelle probably can point to this too as an electives teacher, is that often it's an elective, so it's kind of a throwaway course. Sometimes it's like, oh, we can just put some kids in there, or those couple of nerdy kids can work on that thing, and that's how it's thought of. But maybe we need to start reframing that. So I'm going to go back to the panel on this, and I'll let anybody who wants to start us off on this one just go ahead and do an unmute. Oh, Adam, you want to start off on this one?
Yeah, it's one of those things. Being a former science teacher, I would teach chemistry. And literally, kids are like, when would I ever need chemistry? And you have to do the whole understanding of, okay, well, we deal with chemicals and everything that you do, salt, that's the breakdown of the chemicals. When you talk about biology, the kid's like, I don't need to know anything about biology. It's like, yeah, you are a living thing. You go to the doctor, or there's living things all around you. Well, we have evolved to that point where computer science is around us, and it is in everything that we do. Having this technology is a part of your life, just like biology is a part of everything that you are a part of. Chemistry, also those subjects that are things that are taught in school, they were taught for a reason at the time when they got put in this curriculum, because we felt these are the skills that every child coming through our system needs to have some information on. You don't have to become a chemist. You don't have to become a doctor. You don't have to become a computer scientist, but understanding and having that worldview of how all this stuff works and is integrated, and being able to make modifications and changes, I think is very essential in having our students be prepared for the ever-changing world that is around them right now. I mean, we can go down the rabbit hole of autonomous vehicles and everything else under the sun. All these things are happening now. This is not the Jetsons. This is right here, right now. And the whole COVID situation has even given us more of an idea how that could be changing. Now that we see we're doing this right now via Zoom, and all these people are being a part of this. This is all this whole computer science world that we're living in today.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I mean, if we asked this question 2 years ago, probably our view is even more different. We're probably like, well, yeah, we need to get to it eventually. But with the pandemic and everything that's happened in the last year, it's really kind of risen up a lot of like, wow, we are desperately in need of this with our kids and our students, and not just in terms of like the technology to do what we're doing at this moment, but all the other things you talked about, that inner thread into every part of life. I mean, I think about HR and some of the things they have to, coding and creating surveys and things. I mean, all of this takes some level of computer science, maybe not to the highest level of JavaScript or anything like that, or Python, or Unity even, but still something pretty powerful. Who would like to go next? Tapu, you want to hit that one again? Why do you think computer science is important, besides the fact that you were a former computer science teacher, and of course that is your job now?
Yeah. Well, one of the critical things, Carl, that you mentioned is that computer science historically has been kind of this afterthought that, okay, listen, if we get to it, we get to it. If we find somebody to actually do it, we'll do it. Otherwise, it's not that big of a deal. So we have to get this mentality changed, because as Adam, let me just piggyback off of Adam, he put it perfectly, that it's really just all around you now. I know a lot of states are already recognizing this and are considering, or have considered, making at least some amount of CS a part of graduation requirements. I think, what was it? Is it Arkansas, or I can't remember exactly which
Arkansas
state.
is one. I think Illinois is another one. Yeah.
Right. You now have to take a year or of computer science to be able to graduate. So, it's programming it's all about critical thinking. It's about developing those skills where you have to go out and solve problems. Math is kind of that way, and computer science is kind of that way as well. So these skills just reinforce your entire life on how you go about things, how you go about solving problems, how you go about challenging yourself and finding creative solutions to things. So it's a really, really important thing to be able to have in your educational career.
And I think we're probably already doing it somewhat to some extent, and we just don't know that we're calling it computer science. You talked about critical thinking and those problem solving skills. That's something that I know teachers try to embed in their kids, even in pre-K level, like to talk about just getting through challenges and things like that. And so I think it's just not called technically computer science at that point, but we're really building the foundation of what's going to become later part of that computer science learning. Rochelle, what about you? I mean, I think you've got a different angle on this too, because you're teaching, junior high kids. You're also teaching Spanish at the same time. So, why is it important to you? Because you obviously could have just stayed, I'll just do world languages, but you've changed some of your career path to really build in that STEAM and that computer science component.
Yeah, and it's funny that you asked that because for so long I didn't see that, I would say I'm just a Spanish teacher. Like, how can I do any of these things? Like augmented virtual reality, for example, artificial intelligence for another. Or I would start to bring in actually hour of code years ago. And it was just literally like that 1 hour of code that we would do because I didn't see the relevance to my language classroom, but of course teaching STEAM. And then just in some of the research that I've done too, like listening to, what everybody else has said, I say the same thing, but just some of the research looking at, say, like World Economic Forum, I tend to look at like job predictions because realistically, as a Spanish teacher, I know that not all of my students are going to go on to become Spanish teachers, even though I encourage them because we need some out there.
Right.
But I realized that I need to prepare them for the future. And looking at World Economic Forum, they were doing, like the job outlook and the skills that students need, which of course involve like communication, collaboration, critical thinking, problem solving, all of those. But then it's been talking about how much of an increasing need that there is to have STEM related skills. And I tell my students this all the time. I said, do you know that it's predicted by 2025? I said, which seems like it's kind of far away, but it's going to be here before you know it, that they need to fill like 3.5 million or something. I might be a little bit off on the number, but 3.5 million jobs in STEM. And it's like, that's a lot. So I said, we're counting on you to learn. And it's not that you have to be like the best at it or it has to spark your interest right away. Because what I find, especially in my classroom, is a lot of times the students are kind of hesitant to dive into anything with coding because they're afraid, like, I'm not going to know how to do it. And or they have all of these, or they think I'm not good at math. I'm not good at science. I'm not good at these different concepts or something. And they're kind of hesitant, but I try and say to them, you don't know necessarily what you're going to be doing 5-10 years from now, what kind of job you're going to have, what career path you're going to go down, your education. I said, even looking at me, like I'm teaching Spanish, I'm not teaching French anymore. I didn't even take Spanish in high school, but there is so much relevance in all that we do. And I'm freezing here. Technology, gotta
we can
love
hear
it.
You.
That I try and impress upon my students. Like, yeah, I know. That tends to happen a lot. It's all right as long as the voice is there. It's good. But bringing in these opportunities where students can explore what STEM curriculum might provide, the different, coding, and it doesn't have to be like Python or anything like that. I think it just gives them the chance, at least in my experience, for them to become interested in it or to see if they're interested in it, to see what they can create, to work together. And it builds a lot beyond just like the coding skills that they're developing, for example. I mean, they're building even social emotional learning skills and all of those other like creativity and everything. So I think, at least for myself, initially, I looked at it as like, it's just this one skill. But I think by providing these opportunities where they're learning to code, we're doing all these other things that are relevant to now and in the future to best prepare them. And so that's kind of, once I got away from it's just an hour of code and realized like I could do this all the time. And I took a ISTE computational thinking course and I had to write an algorithm for Spanish. I mean, that was like one of the most difficult things that I ever did, but I didn't really think about how much of what we do is like, it's our own little algorithms for things. So there's ways to do it. Everybody can bring coding into the classroom and coding related concepts. It's just, you just have to start.
Yeah, and to that really quick, the whole concept of what does computer science look like, it's something as simple as using Alexa in your homes. And I'm at work, so I can say Alexa and don't have to worry about anything beeping in my
can't say that
office
here
right now.
Yeah.
But creating a routine, you're talking about if-then statements as you're going through and creating. Hey, when it's 2:00 and the lights are still on outside, I want the lights to power off. In addition to the lights powering off, I want to get this notification. So creating that workflow for
I had to mute him.
Carl, you okay?
Yeah, I got it. That was weird. That was awesome. It's like we started our own DJ remix about CS right there. In. See, now some kid will take that and they'll make it viral and they'll take that one little snippet and we'll be a remix. So you're talking about the workflow and
yeah, the workflow is that, and that's something it's something very simple, and that's making that connection to something that's relevant that someone may see. and then taking that, and now the student can see, oh, so it's not necessarily Python or all these other things. That could be their gateway into the real hard stuff, you know.
Well, that actually is a good segue, because I think all of you started to touch on this, and I think this is where we start to get really down and dirty into it. And by the way, a quick shout out to Kristen, who mentions that her foreign language teachers use bbots and program those based on scripts to create in language using a map of their community. That's a pretty cool idea. Junior and seniors love the connection. Thank you for sharing that with us, Kristen. There are a lot of barriers, and we've kind of started lightly touching on some of the things that are maybe holding people back. Maybe it's funding, maybe it's just general interest level. But what are some things that you guys feel like are the bigger barriers that are like saying, well, this is why a school is not implementing it, or this is why kids aren't interested in it? I'd be curious to hear your feedback on that too. So we'll go with Tapu. What about you on this? Because you've recently out of the computer science classroom, and you talked about some of the, I mean, why you were who you were and who you replaced and what happened there, but also just kind of what you noticed with kids and why they were taking it and why they wouldn't.
So let me just speak to my experience and the school I was in. And I think it's probably reflective of a lot of the different schools. So computer science in general was thought of as this elective that, if I get around to it, I'll take it in my senior year. There's no push from the school to really promote it. The kids that were taking it, it's because they had already been somehow influenced into technology, or sometimes even those high achievers, hey, I want that APCS credit, right? So there was this general sense that it's not important enough to be part of the core. It's not, it's elitist almost, if I can say it like that. Mm-hmm. It's not part of our core stuff. So, I remember seeing the sign-up sheet course, computer science was at the bottom in this tiny little corner, say APCS, CS honors, CS regular. So, when I joined, basically there was no curriculum. There was nothing like Rex Academy or even some of the other competitors, right? I scrounged the internet and found whatever I could to just kind of put things together and, okay, here's how class is going to flow today. And my advantage was that I'm a tech guy. So I had a wealth of experience to bring to the classroom. That's not the case for majority of teachers. And the other thing I found out is professional development, collaboration with other people in that field, it's almost non-existent. So there was another CS teacher in the other high school. We hardly ever talked. Whenever there was district collaboration, CS was never part of it. It was all math. We're going to do math professional development, and you guys get together maybe in the last 30 minutes to talk a little bit about CS. So you have to address this from that top-down approach, and it's got to come from these major district coordinators, curriculum directors saying that, look, this is not okay, that we've got all these jobs, as Rachel mentioned, that there's going to be a big need in just a few years. In fact, it's already here, because cybersecurity, as you know, has a huge shortfall in our country. We don't have enough people trained to be able to do it. So it's just, I think, changing the mindset from everyone who's kind of in the position and power to be able to direct curriculum and direct influence on how this is all going to go. And it really, if I can say, it really needs to start from elementary. Not, we'll deal with it when they get to high school, but rather from that elementary setting, we're doing little things to get them interested and influenced and properly motivated in computer science.
We saw that with the hour of code that Rochelle mentioned too, about having a little bit of a taste of that at elementary. But you're right; it needs to be more than just the hour. It needs to be more than a week.
Hey, I'm really sorry. Is it Rachel or Rochelle? I apologize.
It's Rochelle.
Rochelle, hey, I'm sorry about that.
No worries.
She gets it all the time. She's so good. She just smiles it off. I've seen her do that before. But it's true. And I think, you hit on one of the biggest barriers. I think there's other ones out there that I'll let the other panelists kind of address too, if they have thoughts on it. But the one I want to point out that you just mentioned was you're a computer science guy. You have a comp sci background. You can do that kind of stuff. You could go out in industry and do it. those aren't, those type of people are not going to be long for the world, because they're going to be snatched up and used in other companies. I mean, it's a powerful position. And so what you have left over is you have teachers that are just like, who's going to do it, right? There's a time crunch. I think Lori Guyan, who mentioned in the chat, hey, Lori, how are you doing? She talked about how the biggest barrier they're seeing is that teachers are just feeling the time crunch. They don't want to take all this on because they've already got their own stuff that they have to do. I mean, they can't, plan out a scope and sequence for something that they have no idea what it is because they don't have a computer science background. So that right there is a huge, huge barrier. And I think what I'm seeing in schools that I've been working with lately is that they look around like, who wants to do it? And it's one of those things where everyone kind of steps back, and like the one person standing forward is like, oh, good, you're the computer science teacher, you get to do this course. And they're just not really invested in it, or they don't have the tools to manage it.
The typical story you will often hear is a math teacher kind of just being, or a science teacher being told, hey, listen, we don't have anybody else. You've got computer science next semester.
Yeah. And that's Shirley just mentioned, that the math teachers are driving the CS implementation in New York where they're at. And they're not exactly excited or thrilled about it either. I mean, so we have to figure out a way to overcome that barrier. That's one big barrier there. And I think one of the things, and again, this isn't just to talk about Rex, they are sponsoring this, but I mean, it's not just about that. One of the things I loved about their program when I saw it was that it is very much in a box, turnkey ready. And I love technology, but I'm not a computer science guy like you, Tapu. And I think for me, when I went through it, I was like, man, this is self-paced. It makes sense to me. You can turn on little modules and let the kids kind of guide it, which I think is what I'm always pushing for as a teacher anyways. I want the kids to kind of not take over, but at least have some sort of control over it. We don't want them all playing, Doom right away, but like in Adam's case. But I do think that that's important. So if you can have some sort of turnkey ready to go, it takes some of the pressure off, some of that time crunch that our attendees are talking about in the chat there. Adam, what about you? Do you have Adam or Rochelle? Either one of you? Oh, Adam, you want to jump in? Go ahead.
Well, one of the things is the struggle that teachers have with seeing the connections. If it's separate, it goes back to kind of like, and Rochelle, I know you'll feel me on this one, STEM being an elective, like, oh, it's STEM time. If you can come up with a curriculum and have that component where it is incorporated in that. I know when I was working with some Title I schools and I was trying to do app building, they were like, well, no, they need remedial stuff. Like, you can teach remedial skills and have students learn 21st century skills at the same time. It's a way to teach these ELA skills, these math skills with computer science, with coding. And so when you have that connection, I think that's when it can be part of your regular curriculum. Like when you have a science teacher says, well, I don't teach reading. Yes, you do. You teach science and you teach reading at the same time if you have that lacking. So we can build it. And then the other piece that I can see is the bias that teachers have, just calling it what it is. When you set low expectations, to who you mentioned this, when you take your high achievers, then it becomes an elitist type thing, because you think, oh, only my gifted kids, only my smart kids can do this. There's that bias of teachers in the classroom, and so you exclude so many more students by doing that. And very often it's your students that are in your impoverished areas and your students of color that feel the brunt of that teacher bias in the classroom. So that's that other piece that I think happens very often in those classrooms, because it does become that elective. But if I'm the kid that was struggling in math, then I have to go to an after school. I lose my elective time to do more regular math than going to have the opportunity to have that computer science, those fun, quote unquote, electives and that things. I get more of the stuff that I'm already bad at that wasn't being taught good the first time by the same teacher that didn't teach it to me anyway. But that's neither here nor there.
I love it. And also, again, more great comments coming through. You guys are welcome to use the chat if you'd like. You could send it to panelists and attendees, and everyone can see them too if you want, or you can just send it to the panelists. But I like Kristen here, who mentions that her favorite thing is when a kindergarten teacher wants coding, because it does teach sequencing and patterns and reading skills that all go together, and it all ties into that. And as a former first grade teacher, I love that. Makes my heart proud, just to hear that idea, that building that scaffolding skill that goes into so many other things. It goes into math and it goes into reading. I love that tie-in. We just need to make more people kind of more of aware of it. And then Lori mentions it's not just the honors kids that need that opportunity, but they tend to be the ones that are in there pushing there because of the bias you just mentioned, Adam. So we need to figure out how to break that too. Rochelle, what about you? What are some other any other barriers that we've talked about, or maybe we haven't hit? We've talked about the teacher and the teacher willingness. We talked about maybe our own biases. What else?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind for me was like the barrier was myself, in thinking that I don't have the skills, I don't know enough, I can't bring this into my classroom. Like it started with me as the one that wasn't willing to do that. And I think, I mean, a lot of times I know there are different topics I might want to think about teaching in my STEAM course. And I hesitate a little bit because I feel like I'm not the expert, right? Like I've always have felt like, and teachers are like this, oh, I have to be the expert to bring this in my classroom. Or, I teach Spanish. What am I going to do with coding in my classroom or anything like that? So I think that sometimes it comes down to just educators, and I'm speaking from personal experience, that you feel like you don't have the qualifications or it doesn't fit, or maybe there's even a fear sometimes too of like, so often we have to just teach the curriculum or meet whatever those goals are for the course. And like, there's not enough, especially not now, there's not enough extra time to do these other things. And so working with those barriers, that's a problem, of course. Access or knowing even where to begin with the right resources. And you're right, Carl, like whenever you have something like Rex, where you just, okay, you don't have to do all of the groundwork and figure everything out. Like you have it there. And I love having support like that, because that's how I've gotten started with a lot of other things with my students, in particular in the STEAM course, where I just started, got enough into it to figure it out a little bit. But of course, they don't barely need any instructions from us. We just need to get them to that starting point, and then they take off. But you just have to hold your breath in case they ask you a question like, how do I do this? And I'm like, that's a really good question. You need to figure that one out. And 50, well, probably 75% of the time, like I really didn't know the answer at that point, but it's okay. And then sometimes too, the last thing that I'll say, a barrier when thinking about like where to begin and the resource and access and devices and all of those considerations, it doesn't even have to involve the technology, because the first training that I went to, I had to actually, before I was doing what I'm doing now in STEAM, which is all the emerging technology and everything, they wanted me to teach how to have my students build hummingbird robots. First thing, I didn't know what hummingbirds was. My principal said, you're going to teach hummingbirds for Spanish and French. And I thought they were going to legit get me hummingbirds. I'm like, where does that fit into my job description? But then I figured out what it was. And they sent me to like a coding class, and there weren't any devices. All that was in there were stacks of styrofoam or like solo cups and Post-it notes and highlighters and markers. And they're like, well, you're going to learn to code. And I'm like, with what? And it was figuring out the steps. Like there was an activity involved for coding. And so when it comes to like barriers and things, well, it could be just the person. It could be that feeling of like, it doesn't fit in what I'm teaching, or I don't teach that. So that's for the computer science teacher. But what do you do if you're in a smaller school and there's one, like in my school, we have 2 computer teachers. It can't just all rely just on them. So, but I don't know, it's a problem that I know that in the United States too, I feel like there are less than, I don't know the exact percentage now, but I feel like less than 50% of the schools in the United States have some computer science in their curriculum. And
I'm pretty sure it's way less than that, right, Carl?
yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say around like low 40s is what I was going to say, but.
Okay.
Yeah, the last number I saw was 43%. So you're right on it. I mean, that was the number I saw that was showing that of high schools, that is, in the United States, that offer, public high schools that offer computer science. And I was shocked to see that number in 2021, but it's, I mean, all the things you guys mentioned are all part of the things that are driving this gap and widening this gap too. And I think there's another thing that we didn't mention that, as someone on the IT side, and Adam can probably attest to this too, is whenever you think of computer science, I think of still somewhat in my head, the bias of there's going to be this giant lab with these monstrous machines that need all these sort of installs and crazy things that we need to put on them. And that certain kids can go to that lab at certain parts of the day. They don't have access to it the rest of the time, right? Unless if they're not in that lab. And because when I did C++ in college, that tells you how old I am. We had to go to a specific lab here at the University of Texas campus to do it. And like, that was the only lab that had the programming built in. Now, there's ways that you can do it. The web-based approach that Rex takes is a great way to do that. So you can get that kind of, it's another barrier removed at least, I feel like. And I think that's something, when we're relying on IT, a lot of times we're already overtaxed. So to wait for someone to come and do an install, I mean, that's, it's asking a lot already in an environment where we're already strapped pretty thin. I'm gonna hit this question because we kind of lightly touched on it. Adam kind of hit it a little bit when he talked about a little bit about those biases, and I think this does play a role in it. And I'm going to get specifically, I'm going to drill down. We're talking about equity here, so let's drill down even further. So we talked about some barriers. We've identified some of those. We talked about why computer science is important. But let's really hit this particular spot, because I think we've heard it twice, something about elitism. There is definitely a standard out there where certain kids, high social economic kids, are the ones that are paying to go to these coding camps, or the ones that are getting the money and the funding to do it because they have access to the machines to do it. But what do you think? Why do you think there are other racial and gender diversity gaps? I mean, as a father of 3 girls, I'm always worried about this and thinking about it. What are some of the reasons why you think those kids are just either A, not interested, or B, they don't really have the access that they need to the computer science? I already mentioned the machines, but maybe there's something else that's stopping them. So, Tapu, you want to go with that first on that, Mr. T?
Yeah, sure. I've got a lot of opinions on this. Typical CS class for me, in the 5 years that I taught, 19 boys, 1 girl. What the heck is going on? I mean, this was every single year. I could not get women interested in signing up for CS. I considered a lot of things, like why do they not consider this a serious career for them? Because we need more women engineers. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. We need more women engineers because they have a different way of looking at things. And in my experience, in my classes, the women typically outwork the males, to be completely frank. They just work harder. They took the class more seriously than a lot of the guys did. So one of the things I came down to, that perhaps it's this view that, listen, this is a male dominated field. I'm going to have to work twice as hard to get the same recognition as my male counterparts. But the women that do take it, who do go through a computer science degree, IT technology, they actually have a ton of success. And I hear nothing but positive things from people who went on to major in CS. So that's an issue. Now in college, as I went through my 4 years bachelor's and 2 years master's, typical CS class, if there was, let's say, 50 people, I would say maybe 5, 6, 7 American born, rest, they're coming from Asia to fill those seats. So it's mostly we're Indians. So we live up to our stereotype. What can we say? So we don't have enough Americans in general pursuing this particular field. So these are the 2 big gaps that I noticed. Is it too hard? There's too much work to do before I finally get a really good job. I'm not entirely sure, and I'd certainly be interested in hearing about a lot of the opinions that perhaps from other panelists and perhaps even from our group as well.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of things that go into this too. Shirley mentions in the chat about cultural conditioning of gender roles, often defines females with families, not mechanics and tech. We just had this discussion in our household the other day about, someone, my wife's going on a trip, and then someone asked her, like, well, who's going to watch the kids? And I'm like, there's the problem right there. I mean, it's like, oh yeah, dad's going to babysit the kids. No, I'm a parent too, but that's a whole nother, that's beyond all this. But I think it ties into what you were just saying, in the fact that we do kind of place those gender roles and those gender stereotypes, and then our kids just adhere to it because we're already doing it to them anyway. And so they just continue to kind of do, okay, well, I guess I'm not supposed to be in this class, even though I'm really interested in it. But I look around and I see just a bunch of, it's a bunch of males taking it at the early ages. And then, as you say, in college, I saw the same thing at UT. And engineering, it was very much, not as many Americans taking it. And I think they just kind of decided they wanted to go different paths, and who knows why. Sure. But I think that just seems to be one of the big reasons.
Yeah, my last few classes I took, it was all, these universities have to fill their seats. So when we don't have Americans signing up for these degrees and to acquire these skills, they essentially, we hand out visas, right, to allow in the people who do want to come here and study. So most of my final set of classes that I took, it was most of my Asian counterparts that were here. So it was people from China, Hong Kong, Japan, and of course India, filling a lot of those seats simply because we don't have enough people here that want to take them. So again, it's just an interesting observation. I'm sure there's a lot of, as was mentioned here, socioeconomic, cultural and other things that kind of go into that.
Yeah, I love that Marguerite points out that her blonde-haired, blue-eyed cheerleader went to A&M in College Station, and at the beginning of her group, nobody wanted her in her group. But then 4 years later, they figured out she could code, and she was like, all of a sudden she's now graduating with a degree in biomedical engineering. So I love that. And we need that to not be an exception, but like the norm, right? But I think we need to continue to hear more and more of those stories. Let's continue to share those. Rochelle or Adam, thoughts on this? What do you think? Why are there these gaps specifically with racial and gender when it comes to diversity in these courses? Because we're seeing a lot of, as Tapu mentioned, either white males or males from other countries taking them generally. Either one of you want to start with that one? Rochelle, go ahead.
Was Adam pointing to me?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, just over the years, let me think here, probably almost 5 years that I've been teaching this STEAM course, close to it. I not really counting the year with the hummingbird, where I actually got pretty good at it. And then they moved it to the 7th grade. I'm like, oh, okay. So need something new now. But I know, the students that take my course are in 8th grade, and there are 4 different possibilities that they can take. So it's kind of like an elective. They have to choose 2 of the 4. And I'm trying to think about the last couple of years. I feel like initially I had more boys that were taking the course than girls. And then it started to shift a little bit more. Now this year it's probably a pretty even split. But I do a lot of check-ins with my students and ask them, about their interests, and usually like on a Google form, if we're going to start like coding, and I'll say, do you have any experience coding? What have you used before? What are your interests? And sometimes they'll say, I'm not good at math, or I won't be good at it, or girls don't do that, or people will think this. And like, I hear a lot of different reasons. And sometimes I think it comes down to just maybe, these are their words too, like a stereotype of, well, girls aren't doing the coding. Like, I don't see women out there doing the coding. And it takes, when I hear some of those stories, just my own experience, I like to bring in stories of women who have, who are known for coding and the groundbreaking work that has been done by women in STEM related fields. But I think some of it comes down to, just that young group that I'm teaching, the 8th graders, and maybe a lack of confidence sometimes as well, or peer pressure plays into it sometimes too, because I do have some students who, and it's been different this year because we started fully virtual and then we were hybrid for 18 weeks. And I don't know if that made a difference or not, but what I saw was some students in the classroom, when they were in class, they weren't as vocal and responding and participating as they were when they were at home by themselves. So like, I could see how much they were doing and interacting and creating online as opposed to in class. And I don't know if it's because they lack that confidence in themselves to like share, or if they just don't want everybody else to know that they are interested in coding for some reason. I still haven't figured that one out. So I think that's part of the issue, at least that I've seen in my experience. And the other is just the number of opportunities too that might be available. And if there is just one course offered in school and one teacher who's teaching it, and if that school happens to have a requirement, then all of those, the older students that need that for graduation doesn't give the younger students the opportunity. And I think by the time that they get to, at least I've seen this in my school, their junior year, and if they want to take a course, they don't have the options, possibilities available within their school program. And so that sometimes ends up being a problem too, at least from what I've seen.
Yeah, I think you hit, a bunch of big points there with that too. When you think about, I think the peer pressure one is real. I think my oldest daughter, who's in middle school, is in a robotics program, but only because she got her friends to do it with her, and she wanted to have that comfort of, okay, I got so she's on an all girls robotics team and they're kicking rear end. I'll just say that. I mean, they're doing amazing things and doing different things, than the boy groups are doing. And it's just interesting to see the diversity of thought and what that does and how it impacts them. But then also, she's also started to lose some of her confidence. I've noticed just throughout as the years gone on, because, the boys are just trying to always push and do things. And they're all kind of taking a step back. And I'm like, no, continue, And I think it's just, you have to have support from the teacher and from the parent and from your friends. I think all those points of contact are going to influencing that. Adam, we'll go to you on this one. What do you think? What are your thoughts on that in terms of that gap between, well, I know you have girls as well, where our girls are about the same age, but then also just the idea of that racial kind of divide. Because I think the latest statistic was 3% of CS graduates are actually African-American. I mean, that's a very low number.
I mean, it's really interesting if you pull up the AP statistics across the country, and when you break them down by gender and racial lines. Check it out. I'm not going to spoil the fun for anybody on there, but check out those numbers, and it really is an eye opener. And Rochelle, you'll understand this one. Going back to the STEM piece, when I did a STEM program when I was in Missouri, I went in one school, and it was a school that was 80% minority, and they had this like STEM wall with all these scientists on there, and everybody out there was old, dead, and white. That was and this so this is the vision of what kids think a scientist looks like, and computer scientists and all these other things. So it's kind of hard for kids to be something if they can't see themselves being that. Giving them those mirror and window opportunities makes a huge difference in their ability to grow. Like how many I saw a lot of people talking about Commodore in the chat earlier. You know, how many people can talk about the Fairchild Channel F? Anybody? No, Jerry Lawson. Google that name. You'll learn a little bit of something. Those are the kind of, we talk about hidden figures, which is great, but that's one story of many. And there's people right now of very diverse backgrounds that are doing some very awesome things in these fields. Those are the names and the faces that our kids need to see. Because what we found out is around that middle school age is where, of course, it's all the kids are awkward in middle school. Let's just call it what it is. I don't care what race, what age, what gender. Middle school's awkward for everybody. But that's often where we see a lot of girls are going away from those sciences and math. And so what we are doing, and I know in my system, we're trying to be very specific and targeted and going after the girls to get them involved in these areas. So the using programs like Rex, and then targeting that with girls that code or things of that nature to really focus in on those and put it in front of the young ladies that are out there and give them the resources to do that, to grow in those fields, because they have to see that. I heard firsthand a young lady of Hispanic heritage told me, "Oh, I can't do this." I was like, "Why?" She's like, "Because I'm supposed to have babies." This was a kid that was in fifth grade. And I was like, huh? What are you talking? I was like, no, because she was killing it on her little code and stuff. I'm like, no, 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 no. You can do this too. And so we pulled up some different pictures, and I found some pictures of young ladies. She's like, oh, I can do this. I said, yeah, she's only 25 and she's making a lot of money doing this. She's like, oh, okay, I didn't know that. So she had already in her mind started making that decision. So you have to give them exposure. And it's so important to breaking this cycle of students thinking they can't do that or be in that space. Because not everybody's going to be a computer scientist or whatever the case may be, but we have to broaden their horizon, their opportunities, and build that exposure so they can see themselves in those spaces and start telling stories to people who are alive and kicking right now doing the work. That makes a huge difference in these kids' lives.
The more I'm hearing all of you speak, the more I'm thinking the kids aren't the problem. It's the adults. You know, we are imparting our biases on them. I've shared the story. I did a Facebook Live the other day, and I shared the story. But we were doing a fifth grade career fair thing where the counselor came in and was talking to all the kids about what they wanted to be when they grew up. And they talked about all these doctor, lawyer, things like that. And then someone said, "What about computer science?" And one kid asked, like, "What is it?" And the adult in the room, I was one of the adults in the room, but the person who's leading it said, "Oh, it's like, something where those, a bunch of boys getting, cracking computers open and fixing them and stuff." Exactly the words. And I was like, I sat there, my jaw hit the floor. And so, of course, nobody raised their hand. They didn't want to do that. So I had to interrupt. And I was like, "Guys, can I just interrupt for a minute? Can I just share?" And I was like, "How many of you like YouTube? How many of you like playing games? How many of you like," and I started telling them all these different things. "How many of you like special effects in movies?" And it's just like, they're all leaning in and they're all raising their hands. And I was like, guess what? All of that stuff requires some computer science. Now, let me ask you, how many of you are interested in computer science? And then like all the hands went up, and I was like, it's all how you say the message to them. And I've noticed that a big break happens, and that there's actually data around this, from fifth into sixth, seventh. Around that age is when you start to see the transition out of females, especially into STEM and STEAM courses. That seems to be when it's happening. And I think some of it is we're doing it to ourselves or doing it to our kids, and they don't realize it. So that leads me to our kind of final question, because I know we've got a lot of good stuff to get through here, but I want to make sure we have time for this last one, because I think we've talked about a lot of barriers. We've identified some of the problems. So now let's talk about some solutions. And Adam, you kind of hit on it a little bit with the Girls Who Code. What are some ways that we can motivate those students, all students? I mean, not just the underserved, but specifically the underserved or those in those females. How do we get them more involved and more interested in computer science? Because obviously we're doing not a great job of it as adults right now. So we need to figure out ways to kind of make that more interesting. So I'll leave this as our final question for the panel, and then we'll do some little wrap ups. And thanks for all you in the chat too, by the way. There's a lot of great comments flying into the chat there. A lot of good comments. We are saving all of this information. This is being recorded, so we will have a recording of this as well. So thank you for dropping that in the chat as well. So who would like to start us off? Give us your thought. Give us your 1 minute, 2 minute thought. How do we motivate kids? What's our key to doing this and making it happen?
I'd say making it relevant. I mean, that's the biggest thing, and you were alluding to that point there. You have to make it relevant to what they are seeing, what they're doing. They understand that, hey, this is YouTube. You want to become a YouTuber? Hey, here's some things that you can do with this. So making it relevant to what they're seeing, what they're understanding, that is definitely how to get students in this space, creating their own opportunity. The amazing thing that we're seeing right now is this is a generation of creators. So many students are content creators. Could you imagine, all of us are over the age of 20. I think Rochelle's like 21, but that's neither here nor there. Congratulations on being 21 now. But when we look at what we were doing, none of us were published at the age our students are. All these students have the opportunity to be published, whether it's something that they posted online, whether it's creating video content, whatever the case may be. So tying all this computer science and understanding how they are creating their own opportunities and tying that into computer science, I think is very essential and very key to really getting this movement going and finding the right resources to put in teachers' hands to make it easy for them to grow our own students. So finding a product like Rex and getting it in the hand of those kids, building those skill sets. I love, when I was looking at the curriculum, it has that become your own YouTuber, and they get so it's a lot of stuff on there. So for having one source to kind of get that in the hands of the kids and so they can grow and build their own brand, I think is very important right now.
I love it. Yeah. Tapu, how about you? What's your thoughts? Motivating. How do we get them motivated?
Well, piggybacking off of what Adam said, from a classroom instructional point of view, which is really where I lived for a while. Sorry, the phone keeps buzzing. Okay.
There's like computer science.
Carl, the mistake I made, and partly I would deflect some blame because, again, they just tossed me in there and said, figure it out, right, without too much resources. My instruction wasn't the best the first 2 years because I didn't really know how to teach this. It's one thing to know it. It's a whole nother thing to teach it effectively, and we've all had professors that are brilliant, right? But they can't teach worth a damn because they're not trained in that type of pedagogy. So, I made the mistake of creating, quite frankly, a lot of boring content the first few years I was there. I thought this is the way students will learn because, my mind is very technical and I'm like, okay, if I get this, come on, these kids will get it too. That was my mistake. So what Adam said is instead, get them doing these projects that relate to their own life. Becoming YouTuber is one of the best ones that really works. Getting them to create games, getting them to create artifacts. So it's not so computer science-y so much as it is, hey, I'm doing something really cool. We used Sphero, the ball Sphero, to do a few things in my final year there. And then we also did a little bit of Lego Mindstorms. So we actually had some Lego sets. We got the EV3s. They made some. This was kind of a hilarious experience because constructing the Lego sets correctly, if they're not perfectly balanced, when you tell it to go forward, it'll go off to the side. So it's things like that really captures the, hey, there you go. Adam's got
there.
One. Hey,
May the 4th.
Yeah. So it's doing things that captures the imagination. See, my mistake was I would create labs that said, okay, find the largest value in the array and print it out. Okay, that's
that's not exciting.
That's not exciting. I mean, it's a good way to get people trained on how to be efficient programmers, but that's not what kids are really after. At least not at. You can maybe get away with it in college, but at that level, we need to make it more hands-on. We need to make it more project-based. We need to really help open the imagination. Like, okay, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? What do you want to do? The new course at the APCS, AP Computer Science Principles. This course really does that. If everyone's ever seen the standards for it, this is far less learn the hard techniques of programming and all that, and it's far more use your imagination, explore things. So it's a really good class to get in your high schools if anyone's a high school teacher. It really allows kids to explore, create their own artifact, and use their ingenuity and creativity to do a lot of things.
That's awesome. Rochelle, give us a walkaway point. How are we motivating them?
Yeah, well, everything that they just said, but, and go back to you, Carl, too, like the authentic real world kind of connection, because there was a student probably 3 years ago, and I tried everything that entire year to build a relationship, to make a connection. I went through everything. And honestly, you know what it took? Me looking at the floor and seeing a copy of Ready Player One on the floor. And I said, whose book is this? And it was this student's, and I had read the book and I loved it. And that started a conversation, and the student didn't know like about artificial intelligence and augmented reality and all of these things that tied back in and coding into video games. And that was the start of like a connection with a student. And then the rest of the students seeing the value in that and being able to see what it looks like in the real world and make those connections. And so I think anytime we can bring in something that is authentic and meaningful to them, I mean, that's just going to be a powerful learning experience. But also being willing to embrace taking risks too. And I've said to my students, okay, I'm not really sure how this is going to go, or I don't have all the answers. So, let's just work on this together, because I want to learn about this too, right with you. And I think just buying into it and being part of it with them and learning from them, I think is the best way to go.
I love it. Yeah, all relationships is a part of everything when it comes to teaching, right? And for some reason or another, we've lost some of that with comp sci. We've made it not as fun, or it's like Tapu was saying, it's it's this book and you got to go through step by step, and it's a training manual. I think a lot of the comments just calling out here in the chat too. We've got a lot of people that are like, make it relevant, make those connections. Shirley says, model it, talk it up, make it cool, make it relevant. I love that kind of idea. I do want to thank Rex Academy. I want to thank Tapu, because a lot of the work that you've done to make this program what it is become is based on a lot of the conversations we just had. A lot of it is like, how do we build courses that are a lot more relevant to kids, and how do we make things that kids are going to be interested in, becoming a YouTube star, doing animations, things like that. So again, just a quick shout out to Rex for hosting. And again, if you go to their webpage, rex.academy, you'll see that there is a start free trial button there. They're giving away a free trial of their course right now. You can take any course you want. So choose a course, try it out, see what you think, try the self-pacing. You don't have to be a computer science expert to do it, which is awesome. Again, I'm speaking from experience on that as well. And again, thanks to our panelists today. Rochelle's written amazing books about a lot of things with STEAM too. So if you get a chance, check out some of her books as well. Dr. Adam File, we're waiting on your book, sir. We know it's coming. It's in the mail. I'll see you on the podcast soon. And Tapu, of course, thank you again. Oh, look, he does a little podcast background there. Thank you for that. A little undisrupted as well. Thank you, guys. Thank you in the chat, guys. Excellent conversation. If you're interested, we are doing more. We're doing these Facebook Live sessions. These are more like quick hitters, but every Tuesday night at 8:30 Eastern Daylight Time, we're doing these sessions where you can actually it's just me, it's Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. We can interact. It'll be kind of fun, a little more laid back, not quite as webinar-ish, but very much like this kind of conversational in talking about kind of the big issues that we have in computer science. We had Phil Hintz on this last Tuesday on May 4th, so we're going to have some more guests, surprise guests, including maybe a couple of the panels you see here today. So we would hope for you guys to join us for that. Thank you guys so much. And again, 20 of you lucky attendees today will be selected to win a Grubhub gift card. So if you're in this, we've saved all your information. Those of you that have logged in and joined in, thank you guys for joining today. We are over time, but again, thank you all for being a part of this conversation. Appreciate it so much. Whoops, there we go. Thanks, everybody.